Hello and welcome to the Android Cast episode 20. This week myself, Eric, and Mario discuss our experiences testing out Allo. We look ahead to Google's October 4th announcement of the new Pixel phones and other devices, and we also discuss our experiences trading in our Note 7 devices. Be sure to subscribe to us. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio, as well as YouTube and our RSS feed. With that, let's get into the show. Well, the first thing we wanted to talk about this week was something that's got a lot of discussion on the subreddit. Google Allo has been released, something we were waiting for 4 months. It's been over 4 months since its introduction. The release was kind of weird, given that they were hyped. It was one of the team leads was hyping about it and giving hints on Twitter, and then all of a sudden it dropped at like midnight on a Tuesday night, and it was actually staged to start in India, so we had to pick up the APK and everything. But here at XDA, we've been playing around with it quite a bit, and we've got some opinions on it, I believe. It's certainly one of the things is what niche does it solve? Or there's a lot to discuss here, but let's start with what are you guys' initial impressions once we downloaded Allo and played around with it?
Well, I like that you use past tense because we're obviously not using it anymore. I think it's a good app, though. I think that from a design standpoint, there's many things that feel extremely polished, and I think that the amount of polish that went onto those aspects, particularly like UI elements, how they behave, and of course Google Assistant, which is arguably the flagship feature of Allo, all of those things I feel took away from resources that perhaps could be allocated into making it more feature competitive. And I also think that we'll get into this later, but I think that the fact that it was released with so many features missing, features that other IM clients already have, and that it's a very competitive market, and the fact that they can make a super huge, super inclusive, integral entry to this market, when there's so much competition, so many standards, so many people already used to and to their special IM client or their couple of IM clients, I think that all of that kind of takes away from its merits, and it does have merits. I think that let's start with Google Assistant. What do you guys think of Google Assistant so far?
So it's a bit of a mixed bag because Google Assistant does some really interesting things, and it does it really well. Like the way it displays the content, it's a very rich display of content. It can do on-the-fly Google searches. I think someone was having trouble with their computer, and we said, Google Assistant, how do I blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, it gave you a step-by-step instructions for how to do it. But then on the other hand, it's still a beta product, and I'm experiencing some very weird issues with it where it's just not working the way it should. On Wednesday morning, the first morning after I got it, I opened up Assistant and I said, hey, what is my commute today? And it's like, can't tell you. I don't know. And I was like, huh? Like, that seems kind of weird because I know I had tried that the night before. So I was talking with Daniel at XDA, and he's like, oh, no, it works for me. And so I sent him a screenshot. He sent me one. The difference was if you say, what is my commute? It does not work. It doesn't know what to say. But if you say, what's my commute, using the contraction, then it correctly gives you the information. So little bugs here or there that we're not used to experiencing with Google Now. With Google Now, it seems to be a bit more resilient. And Google Now blew me away, whereas Google Assistant, every once in a while, it has some issues that are a bit frustrating.
I think it's neat in like a one-on-one sort of conversation where you can't really blow the other parties out with too much noise and nonsense, right? But in our big group chat, it doesn't work very well. It's just a bunch of almost spam at the time, Now,
how much do you think is that room? Us like just testing out everything all at once, and how much of that will go away as we get used to it, and then can it just be a utility that lives there and is occasionally called upon by one person every now and then?
Sure, of course it can. I mean, I think it goes away because the volume of us using it has gone away too, right? But, I showed it to my friend who has never used Allo, doesn't really keep up, but has like a Moto X Pure and likes Android and has used Android forever. We talk on Hangouts. It's almost exclusively how we communicate. And so I sent him an Allo message. He's like, what is this? You know, I got that weird notification that's kind of like a text, kind of like an IM, and tells you can install this app. He's like, what is Allo? What is all this? You know, and so I talked him through installing it and showed him some of the features. He's like, man, that's really cool. He's like, why didn't they add any of this to Hangouts? I was like, I don't know.
Why don't you ask Allo? I probably prompt you. I don't know.
Right.
But,
and the deal for me is that I've been a long time Google Voice user, and it's good and bad, right? It's got some cool features, but I feel so trapped and so kind of apprehensive about them just deleting any part of the Google Voice service at any moment. And then the thing is that Hangouts is a great service with a terrible, terrible app, no matter where you go except iOS. And then Allo is a great app that's really smooth and works really nice, but the service is bad. I don't want to have to have one device and not use a desktop.
Yeah.
And Eric, I think you made a good point about Assistant. One of the cool things about Allo and how they've done Assistant is you actually have access to Assistant in group chats. So that's to me, that's the real breakthrough feature here, is that we can have a chat together and then I can just be like, hey, Assistant, show me a picture of blah, 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 or find this video. And then boom, it goes and shows it. And it saves time, and it's a different model of doing AI assistance, because until now, everything has always just been a personal assistant.
Well, what me and my buddy did last night when I was showing him Allo, we were talking about movies at the time or something, and he had never seen Wolf of Wall Street. And so I was like, you never seen that? And he's like, no. And so I just sent you type at Google Wolf at Wall Street or whatever. And she's like, here's some information. And then you can hit a button and see the trailer. And so some of that stuff is pretty neat and a time saver. But I don't know how much I'll really use it, particularly with no desktop client.
So there's one thing I think that needs to be optimized. Is just even without insane amounts of volume of people spamming at Google, at Assistant, even then, it still takes a substantial portion of the screen, especially if your keyboard is up in the chat. I think that can be reworked, because when I originally thought about bots and Google Assistant being a bot, I thought that it would find ways to kind of grab that information and send it as a message rather than send it as a special Snowflake UI that is not, I thought that it would just be a bot like you find on other bots in other clients, something more like Slack or something more like the bots that you find on Telegram or whatever, rather than just being this thing that that displays this huge information rich, which I think is great, but I think that the size needs to be tuned a little bit. Other than that, I think that this is great for group chats, like you guys said, because when you Google it, everyone can see it. Everyone knows instantly what's going on. You can do this to, for example, solve discussions, like people arguing about a fact, and you just type and you ask the assistant what the fact is, and the assistant replies with the fact, and there's like, well, I'll be damned. It's very similar in that way to the way I think smartphones changed the family dinner table discussions, when people were arguing, no, it's this, no, it's that. And then someone pulls out a BlackBerry or nowadays an Android phone and just looks it up on the internet and finds a Wikipedia entry or whatever. I know that changed my family dinner table discussions. And in a similar way, I mean, we're all tech savvy here, but I can imagine this being very well incorporated into our daily chat rooms a few years from now, once it gets more polished.
Yeah, I like the idea that Google Assistant, this is really their first foray into this, and it's clear that they intend to have some branding on this and potentially apply this to other products. And it's going to be interesting to can we get used to that? Is there a future where all of a sudden you can, regardless of the app that you're in, maybe not quite on an OS level, but on various Google apps, you would always have access to being able to use Assistant. And furthermore, there's also, if you look at the way they've implemented Assistant in group chats in Allo, you do at Google, but the way that they've done it, you have to tap on Google and there's a list there. At first we thought, we can do username mentions. Yeah, that wasn't the case. To me, I think they may have alternate versions of assistants or bots or whatever we want to call them that could eventually be added there in the future.
Or maybe they were planning on introducing mentions and didn't release it. I mean, mentions has been one of the most requested features on Hangouts. Particularly, we have a huge Hangouts chat and it's so big and it's active almost 24/7. So we all have notifications off. Mentions would be great. Right? We get around it by PMs and stuff, but it's still kind of annoying. And this is the thing though. There's so many things that I feel Allo should have that it just doesn't have. And the things that it does have, it does really, really well. I really, Corey, you and I played a lot with the voice messages, and I really like the system. I really like shouting. Shouting is hilarious. I don't care about the stickers. I think that's stupid. The only sticker I care about is the cat puking. That's like the best sticker on Hangouts. That's it. But other than that, it's really, really polished up. I had no performance issues, and I have a Galaxy Note 7, which is but other than that, it was a really nice experience. It just didn't have enough to hold me in, to hold any of us in, and this is ultimately a problem. They're releasing this application in a market where everyone already has an IM client. Think about it this way. When you buy a smartphone, you buy it because you have friends and you want to talk to your friends. They already have IM clients, and you go to the IM clients that your friends are using.
Sure.
Now, what is it going to take for a new application by Google or by whoever to kind of take away all that? If it's not just taking away individual users, it's taking networks of users, networks of friends and families. And, I know that it was really hard for me to convince my dad, my mom, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my girlfriend's sisters, all of these people to switch to Hangouts. Now Allo comes out. There's no way I'm going to convince them to jump to Allo now because they're so used and they like Hangouts.
Yeah, you've identified a really big topic here is, right, you need to have your friends on the app to be able to use it. It's all about adoption. And one thing that was a big topic this week was, hey, it has to have SMS integration, or hey, it needs to be baked into the operating system. People had expectations, and there's actually a good article on XDA Developers this week about the expectations of Allo and how they were a bit off in terms of what we actually received. But people had expectations that this was going to be Google's response to iMessage. And this would be the way for Google to magically have everyone centered on one app. They got control of the operating system, be able to have everyone use that. But I have to remind everyone here, that's not the way that Google does things. If all of a sudden Google comes out and says, hey, you know what, OEMs, I know you guys like to do your own chat clients, but we're going to have to change that. You have to use Allo now. It's just a requirement. That's not a good thing. And that's part of the difference between Android and iOS is that with iOS, you do get more of a walled garden. They are more comfortable having a heavy-handed approach in certain things, and they can benefit from that in certain ways. But on the other hand, we have certain freedoms that we enjoy in the Android ecosystem, and having Google be heavy-handed here, I don't think that's what we want.
No, and the other thing too is for me, the timing with Allo is it came out shortly after I bought an iPhone 7 Plus, right? And from a very US-centric point of view, iMessage is still so dominant, and the app itself is great. I mean, there's no you don't text someone with an iPhone and they're like, "What's iMessage?" Because it's just so seamless, right? It's what everyone in Android has been asking for a while, at least here in the US, right? Is an iMessage seamless thing. So essentially, Hangouts with merged conversations that sort of happens in the background.
They tried that before, right?
No, they had the merged conversations, but it was never sort of like implemented in the same way where you had.
It was never seamless.
Yeah, it was never seamless.
Yeah,
you had to toggle as well, right? You could switch, and it was very. It was kind of half-hearted, which seems to be the story sometimes. But I mean, iMessage, using both of them side by side, Allo and iMessage, like the little nerdy big emoji slam effects, all these other things that they've added to iMessage is, it's very similar to Allo. It's just as fun, and it's just frustrating to see Apple have gotten that part of it at least right. 5 or 7 years ago, or whenever they came out with iMessage, they took one shot at it, they nailed it, and it entrenched itself here in the US. And now, many, many years later, we've had a couple tries from Google, and we'll probably have another, right?
Yeah. I mean, the app of the month, the Google app of the month. I mean, do you guys even remember Google Spaces? Remember Google Spaces? I was just like, why did we need that app? And with Allo, it's different. And I want to talk about SMS fallback. I've never used SMS, particularly because I come from South America, where SMS were really expensive, and everyone used WhatsApp. Or nowadays, a lot of people are using Hangouts, which is great. I like to think that I was the sole person that convinced and created this change reaction of Hangouts in South America. But no, but people are using Hangouts and WhatsApp now. They've never really used SMS. In the US, it's very, very, very common to use SMS because so many plans come with unlimited texting. But in other countries, it's not. So, but here's the thing. There's a lot of people criticizing those who are disappointed about SMS fallback. But at the same time, I kind of understand where they're coming from. Because if there's something that would greatly enhance or rather diminish the pain of using Allo, would be SMS. Because you would be able to use Allo, use the client, the beautiful polished client, and still be in contact with all your friends who don't necessarily need to use Allo, because you can just, text them through your phone using texting and not data. Right. And not the special Snowflake service of Allo or whatever IM client that comes out.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a big miss, and I think you've got to have at least basic SMS capability so people at least use the app.
Yeah. And again, I really, really like the app, and I really like what they're doing with Google Assistant. But the problem is that all of these constraints, and we were specifically about this in the portal, how all of these constraints, all of these missed opportunities really take away from the potential of the application, which is ultimately what we are frustrated about. I think I know that Daniel and Steven were frustrated about that. I was, because, I commissioned those articles and I told them, we should write about this. And they did a tremendous job. And now we're discussing it, and it's the same thing, because ultimately, we really, really like Google Assistant. We really like some of the things that Google is bringing here. A lot of people accused our articles of being too negative, or, I don't know, fear-mongering, whatever that means, because it's an IM client article. I mean, whatever, right? But ultimately, I think that our arguments are sound in the way that this could have been a great hit. And leaving aside, I think it is unfair to expect that Google would just randomly come out with iMessage alternative, competitive alternative that would, unify the Android messaging ecosystem and solve that mess. I think Droid Life had an article about that, which I agree with that point. But I do know that people have a complete right to be disappointed that these features are not coming, and that Google once again showed that it's not really in tune with what consumers want. I think that the lead of Allo actually said this in a tweet, or someone in Allo leadership, and this Justin Alberti also said that universal platforms are not the future, which he might be right, but it's very clear to me, reading the subreddit, reading XDA, reading Twitter and social media, that people want universal platforms. People want to have one app that can do the voice call, that can do this, that can send videos and GIFs. And I think that Google, having so many services and being able to integrate all those services, is missing out by not putting out a good universal app. They say that their argument is that the home screen has made navigation between apps easier than navigation within one app. I don't think that's true. I think that really depends on whether you can actually design a good app, which Google is not extremely good at. We've seen that time and time again. But if you design a good universal app, there's no need to use the recents button every time you want to access a new function. It could be integrated seamlessly.
I think you're right too. I mean, look at how many people, like normal non-XDA, tech nerds that follow all this stuff. Look at their home screens, right? Look how many people have the default Samsung Galaxy X, layout with the giant weather widget and the Samsung email app and all that stuff.
20 notifications on red.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think the fact that you can have multiple apps doesn't mean that one shouldn't do it. I don't see the advantage.
Yeah. Plus, that's a very good point that you have right there. In the current system, if you have multiple apps, that means that your experience is it's severely tied to your individual phone's performance. Because if you have a very crappy processor and very crappy RAM, and it's all different packages, all having to deal with the Java heap memory allocation or whatever, and the apps get kicked out of RAM, and you want to go back to the function, but it's kicked out of RAM because you have a crappy phone, or you have a slow phone with particularly bad storage or a bad processor or whatever, that will affect, I think, the multi-app experience and having to switch multiple apps for your functions rather than have one universal optimized platform that's not gonna have features get kicked out of RAM, etc., right?
Yeah. Anything else to say on Allo, or should we move to the next topic here?
Well, I do want to do the closing, and again, we really recognize the potential of Google Assistant, and we really recognize the failed potential of what could have been the iMessage competitor. I personally think it's unfair to expect Google to somehow, in 4 months that we know about this app and what we know about it, what we knew about it didn't really indicate that it would be an iMessage competitor. So expecting them to come out with an iMessage competitor that would redefine and fix the mess of the IM situation on Android, I think that's unfair. But we as consumers are completely justified in being frustrated that Google has not presented a product that was complete enough to make a serious entry into this market, specifically because we root for Google. I think that this would have been wholly different if it would have been another company making this app, In fact, it could have been even better in the sense that because our expectations would have been lower because it's not Google. And I don't know why people have such high expectations for everything Google when we've been disappointed time and time again. If it would have been another company putting out this IM client, we would be like amazed at it, especially if they had Google Assistant or, like random app assistant, whatever they would call it then.
Yeah, and just my closing would be that, again, I want to stress that I like the app. I think the app is great. I think they did a good job of making it smoother and more responsive and less annoying to use than Hangouts is. But I still think they've added to the confusion on the platform rather than solved any real issues.
Yeah, it's definitely a Gen 1 product, and there's some really interesting things, particularly around the Google Assistant. And to me, I think we'll want to keep our eye on it and see what happens. Does Assistant creep into other future products? And in fact, we know one future product where it is going to be creeping into that we expect to hear about on October 4th is Google Home, which is their competitor to Amazon's Alexa. It's got that multi-room audio. You've got the voice support, and I think we did recently see a potential leaked price on it of $129. If you compare that to, I think the Echo is at $180, and then the new Echo Dot is $50. So it's pretty fair price actually. I'm certainly going to pick one up at the cost of $129. It's not quite at the level where I would be able to buy a bunch of them and have them throughout my house, which is really how they've been advertising it.
Yeah. I think it's great that they're finally coming out with this. They're also coming out with this, Wi-Fi router, allegedly at the same price. It might be the same thing. I have a Google On Hub, and I'm kind of salty that they're coming out with another Wi-Fi router, especially one that's going to be smarter. When this one was touted of being smart and having the capability of receiving new features, which it barely has. That aside, I particularly don't care about routers. That's why I have a Google On Hub, because I just set it up and just leave it there. I don't have to modify anything in particular. Other than that, because my girlfriend really likes how it looks, and girls are not particularly fond of the routers that look like spiders with cables everywhere in the middle of the room, right? Yeah. So the aesthetic part is also nice. But going back to this Google Home thing, I can't wait until Edward Snowden tweets about how it's the worst thing ever, and then every single publication writes an article saying, Edward Snowden says don't use Google Home. And that aside, I can't wait to see how integrating Google Now into my home would be like. Because, Corey, you're a fan of Alexa. or Echo rather. We don't want to be, yeah. You're a fan of Alexa or Echo. How will you see Google Now changing your life flow, so to speak?
So let's start with what I like about what Alexa does and what I think it introduced that the other voice interaction systems didn't have. They really have nailed the user experience of it. The fact that you can say the wake word and then continue straight into your query is phenomenal. And the opposite is you say that trigger word for Google Now, which I'm not going to say because I don't want to set everyone's phone off. And then you have to wait like 2 seconds for it to go ba-dink, and then you can talk. So it's just
if you have a Note 7.
model. What's that?
You have to wait 2 seconds if you have a Note 7.
That's true. Yeah, that's inflated because I have a Note 7. But so you've got that. Whereas with Alexa, you can literally just go on with your statement. And then the other thing is I'm talking about Alexa. I've got my Echo right behind me, and it's not going off. It's very good at detecting whether or not I'm actually addressing it. Only once every month or two do I ever have a false positive with that, which is much different than the way that Google Now does it. So that's going to be key. Can Google Now offer a competitive user experience with their product? The other thing that I think the main use cases are for these types of units is media consumption. So you get up in the morning, you ask it to play the news for you, and it just starts going, or play the latest episode of this podcast, and it immediately goes. It's a much better experience than searching for it on your phone. The other big use case of these devices are for Internet of Things. So if you've got Philips Hue smart lights, if you've got TP-Link smart plugs, you can add voice control to pretty much anything in your house. So you could hook your coffee maker into a smart plug and then ask Alexa or Google Home, if it has integration, which I'm sure it will with products, to turn on your coffee maker when you get up in the morning. So really, it's to me, that's one of the most interesting use cases is a relatively affordable hub for a smart home that allows you voice access to various different actions, especially with IFT integration. Yeah, I am particularly interested about the coffee part because I'm a big coffee consumer, and making coffee is kind of annoying waiting for it. In fact, I just made some right before this podcast because that's how life is. I think it's going to be great. I haven't been able to use the Amazon Echo, but I do really like how they opened up to developers, and there's so many solutions, even if some are not like the most the smoothest ones. I like that you can do all these things, and particularly like you said, house integration, smart home integration rather. That's great. Now, if only those Philips Hue lights would drop in price a little bit, I think that would be a great effort, a coordinated effort to have those drop in price or have a more affordable alternative come out, and then Google Home, because then you can really advertise it. You can really advertise that thing. And there are cheaper smart bulbs out there, especially if you don't get the color changing ones, they're dramatically cheaper. It's still a bit of a premium, but there's alternatives out there that are coming out
Corey,
too.
We need the purple lights to make YouTube videos.
Now the Hue and Echo combination is probably the most futuristic my life has ever felt in the past few years. Just walking into a room and telling it to turn the lights on is a really cool feeling and impresses the layperson pretty heavily.
Yeah, normie. So, we could talk about the Note 7, we could talk about the Pixel, but let's go with the Note 7 first. So we've received updates to our Note 7s. They've received great features, and I've received great penalties because I have not yet exchanged mine. Not because I live on the edge, but I do want that new edgy HTC phone that they're announcing. But other than that, no, it's because I bought it from Amazon because I didn't buy it. Someone bought it. And
dabbled in the gray
me.
market.
Right. No, but this is an Amazon bought phone from, like you said, a third party seller. So it's particularly more complicated to recall this phone. But I got this update, and now I can only charge 60% or 80% if I flip a toggle. I am going to look for ways to I know that a lot of people are going to get mad at me for saying this because safety always comes first, but I do want to find a non-root way of lifting that cap, and we're actually already tinkering with it, and I think we can do it. So stay tuned for that. Actually, we probably shouldn't publish that in the portal. It's gonna get we're gonna get letters. Anyhow, yeah. But with that came some performance improvements, particularly to the fingerprint scanner, and I know you're particularly fond of that, Corey.
Yeah, this was something I was surprised about. I haven't heard many people talking about it, and I think the problem for Samsung is the news is dominating around, the battery issues that they've had. But man, this latest update to the Galaxy Note 7 has some really good features on it. The most visible one is the new notification system. They've really cleaned it up. They've gotten rid of a lot of the space between notifications to make a more efficient use of screen real estate. And they've got grouped notifications. So if you have multiple notifications from a single application, it'll roll those up into one notification, which you can further expand to view all the notifications. It's really well implemented. Really a fan of that. But then the biggest surprise that I saw was I was playing with my new Note 7 that I got, and I hit the home button, just tapped it, and all of a sudden it unlocked and it went through to my screen, and I was like, huh? Like, that's not right. Did I forget to turn on my screen lock or something like that? Because what I'm used to especially with the Note or even like the S7s, is you got to press the button and then leave your finger on the button for a good second or so. Now, literally, I can tap it and lift my finger as quickly as I can, and it's going through straight to the home screen. It's a drastic. I mean, it's a small change, but it's a big enough change that it completely changes the way that I do this. I pull it out of my phone, and all I have to do is tap a button now, not hold it for an undefined amount of time.
It's a change that's long overdue because if you think about it, the Nexus 6P, amazingly fast fingerprint scanner. Then you look at the OnePlus 3. That thing is so fast. The fingerprint scanner is so fast. And other phones too, much cheaper phones have fast fingerprint scanners. But the crazy thing is that Samsung was the one to push fingerprint scanners into the mainstream with their admittedly awful swipe fingerprint scanners in the S5 and Note 4. Man, that was so bad. What were they thinking? Anyhow, but yeah, the fact that just now they managed to put this update to make their latest flagship competitive with fingerprint scanners, it's kind of weird. That being said, Samsung has a lot more security features that are really, really cool. I really like Secure Folder and all that stuff. I've never touched the iris. Well, of course, I can't touch the iris scanner, it says. But I don't use the iris scanner because I think that's a gimmick. But I do like all the other features that they integrate with their security. Like even like the incognito mode on their browser, you can put a password in it. That's cool. Stuff like that I think is really cool.
I think that I'm going to disagree slightly with Corey and say the most obvious different feature is that lovely green battery icon that clashes with every single app you launch into.
Now's the time to do the puking cat stick. Right?
Yeah, to me it seems totally silly to have a little software tweak like that be the only indication of a fixed phone, right? I mean, put a dot on the back and the silk screen with you've got the regulatory logos and all that kind of stuff, or put something that can't be modified via software. It just seems silly to me. To declare hardware safe with a software color change.
It is so easy for me with this unsafe phone to modify the status bar, and I can modify all of it. Hell, I can I'm sure that someone's already figuring out how to modify the flag, and I wouldn't even have to modify the system UI. I would just read it as if it was a safe phone, and then I can go on a plane and whatnot. So I think it's a silly solution in a sense. I get why they're doing it. I think that the battery cap in particular is not so much about safety, but about basically persuading users into turning in their phones or
irritating you into changing it in or whatever.
Yeah. Of course, like I said, there are ways around it. I hope we can find a way around it without root. Again, not to be irresponsible, and we're probably not going to publish it, so don't send us letters yet. We're just curious people, and we really like figuring these things out because that's XDA. That's what we do.
Well, and Corey mentioned the new notifications too. What I think is interesting is that I don't think they're really new, right? I mean, your build has had the notifications like that for a while. Yep. So what we had was a phone released in the US and globally with 2 slightly different software builds. And then the one in the US was updated to look like the international one.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't know what that says, right? I don't know if that means that they just, again, like people speculated, rushed this phone out and then had some software build differences, or they spent more time on the Exynos one. I don't know what the real story is, but it's really interesting that, a month later we get an update to look like the international version.
And I do want to go over hardware in this regard. Now, you guys have said that you guys found new issues with your recalled Note 7s to the point where you're doubting that they're really, really extremely new, right?
I just think that, I turned mine in, right, and got a safe one. And the one I turned in was, hardware-wise for me, was pretty great. I didn't really have any complaints. The buttons were good. Everything was solid. The replacement one, the buttons are a bit looser, which, again, kind of a minor nitpicking detail, but it's noticeable.
It's a deal breaker.
Yeah, right. And the S Pen's tip is a little bit looser. The vibration motor has sort of like a rattly kind of sound at the end of it. It's not quite as stiff or, I don't know, solid as the old one was. And I don't think that it's a refurbed unit or anything. I think it's new, but it just, I don't know if they were maybe rushed again. The QC was lightened up or something in order to get these out.
Yeah, I've been noticing additional build issues on this phone that I hadn't with the other one. The biggest one for me is the home button is significantly less clicky. It's got like it's very mushy. There's hardly any click to it at all, and it's actually a bit annoying. So I'm gonna give it a few more days and see if I can get used to it. If not, I'll probably try to get some sort of a warranty replacement on it. But I think it's just I don't think all their phones are. This isn't like a problem on every single device. I think it is probably a question of quality control, and we know they were really working hard to get these millions of units out there as quick as possible, and perhaps that came at the expense of quality control.
I think that it's not due to that though, because like I said, I was really nitpicky about the buttons on mine. So this is the third unit I get to own, and this one has worse buttons than the one before, which had better buttons than the one before. And I've tried, I'm very obsessive about buttons for whatever reason. I guess it's because it's the tactile interaction with your phone where you have that feedback. Anyhow, so, I've gone to stores and I've tried display units and I've tried other people's units, and I found that the buttons in particular have crazy variance. And also something that has crazy variance is the S Pen tip. Like, you can find some units where when the S Pen is stored, you can tap it and you can see that the button itself is moving a lot. And in some other ones, it's completely stiff.
Maybe we just got lucky the first time, Corey.
It could be.
Who knows?
Well, the other deal too is, did you go to you went to the store, the T-Mobile store, to take yours back?
Yeah. So this was kind of interesting. I called the store first, and I was like, "Hey, do you guys have any units in stock?" They're like, "No, we ran out like right away in the morning." I was like, "Okay, when are you going to be getting additional units?" And he's like, "I don't know. Could be tonight, could be tomorrow." And I was like, "Okay, is there anyone who does know?" Like, I just needed to know like when to make a trip up there. And he's like, "No, I don't know what to tell you." Like, is there anyone that can tell me when I get $1,000 non-exploding version of the phone? Exactly. So now, to T-Mobile's credit, I ended up hanging up. I went to their website, and there's a number that you can call to talk to someone that was dedicated to resolve this Note 7 exchange. And I talked with them and explained to them what had happened. And they said that they're really recommending people call them rather than going into the stores. These stores are just getting slammed with people showing up. And how do you know how many units to get to the store with the demand of how many people are going to just walk in and try to do it? So what they ended up doing for me and what they'll do for people is, if you call them, you can get your replacement shipped to the store. I think they're sending it with like one day shipping, and then you show up the next day, and then you can swap it out, and they've got it with your name on it just sitting in the back, so that you're going to have a replacement there. And it helps them in terms of knowing how many phones they need to get there. So contact your carriers and don't just walk into a store. If your carrier has other options for calling them, you may have better luck.
Yeah, I called 4 or 5 T-Mobiles around me, and one of them was like, yeah, we got some. And the others were just like, I don't know, or, try tomorrow, or who knows, no idea, and all that. And I went there, and there was probably 4 or 5 other people there doing the same thing, either before or after me. And one guy before me got his done, left, and then while they were doing mine, which took a while because the line that the guy had to call was busy, the guy came back into the store and was complaining about his home button.
Well, I think that we should transition not so smoothly into our last topic of the day, which is the Pixel devices, right?
Yeah, so we kind of buried the lead a little bit with that October 4th event. We're going to see Google Home. We talked about the router, potentially a new 4K Chromecast. But I think the thing that we're most excited for is Google announcing their new Pixel phones. We originally were referring to these phones as Nexus phones, Sailfish and Marlin. And then it came out recently that Google's going to be taking a little bit of a different approach with these phones. We've seen some statues that they've put up or some marketing materials with the catchphrase "made by Google." And so that's kind of interesting too. Like, have they actually made these themselves? Are they still going with other manufacturers? And then what we know is because they're going to be branded as Nexus or as Pixel phones, not Nexus phones, we're seeing some leaks in terms of features that will be exclusive to these Pixel phones, launchers and stuff like that. Kind of exciting to see. We know quite a bit about it, but I bet we'll be surprised by a few things too.
Yeah, I definitely think that we'll be surprised. I think that these phones they're going to be pretty good. It really depends though the future of this Pixel endeavor, and if they're touting it so, they're hyping it up so much with this made by Google thing, they really got to nail it down. Because if they do this, imagine their first made by Google phone. Imagine if it had Note 7 kind of issues. Nobody would buy another made by Google phone ever again. But of course that won't happen. I think that this will be a pretty solid device. Whether it's manufactured by OEMs or by Google, I mean, ultimately it's going to be manufactured in a factory that Google has no control over, right? It's going to be manufactured in poor working conditions, just like a real smartphone, whatever, right? So Google, ultimately, I don't care about that bit, whether it's designed in conjunction with HTC or not. Mm-hmm. I particularly don't care as long as the phone ends up looking nice. I do like that if it is HTC, well, HTC has been pretty good at design and their manufacturing has been very, very decent. They've had some build quality issues in the past, but overall, it's really built solidly well built phone.
Yeah, I've got an HTC 10 that I love. The build feels great. The phone feels nice. It's solid hardware. So
and the phone's a tank too.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm getting a bigger version of an HTC 10 with like solid Google software, it should be a pretty good phone. I mean, it won't be incredibly exciting with radical new features or anything like that, I don't think, but it's going to be radical new hardware features. That is, I don't think we're going to get weird things like an iris scanner and it sounds like we're not getting water resistance too, which is
it's going to be really tough.
No, but you get IP53.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough for this phone.
But I mean, that's not 67 or 68, right?
I think it's going to be very tough for this phone to justify itself. I know we've seen some leaks on the price. It's going to be relatively expensive. And it's got a bunch of competition, particularly in that mid-range market. OnePlus 3 is out there, probably one of the best phones out there, at least ones that we prefer right now. And what is this going to offer? It's going to have does it have the 821 processor? So slightly improved processor. It doesn't have as good of water resistance as its competition. It actually is going to lose some people from the Nexus fan base because, as we discussed on the XDA portal, as of right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be possible to systemless root. Is that correct?
Yeah. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be rootable, but systemless root, as we know it and as we understand it, won't be possible in the sense that the way systemless root has worked so far, you cannot touch the system because of DM Verity, which checks the integrity of the partition. And now updates are patched at block level rather than a file-based update. But what they're doing now is they're putting DM-Verity, which is in the RAM disk, they're including that with the system partition, meaning that you can't touch that. And because you can't touch that, you cannot disable it in the ways that you could in order to root the phone at boot time. But what is interesting though is that of course you're gonna have root anyway. As long as you have an open bootloader, what you're gonna be able to do is, for example, flash a kernel that has DM-Verity disabled. I know that many phones already do that. I know Sony phones have done that, and I believe the Note 5, the first root that it had going for it, it was kernel based. You had to flash a custom kernel which didn't have security restrictions for root, and so that's cool. The fact that you won't lose root, but you will if you lose systemless root, that's a big deal because since Marshmallow, every root that you're flashing on your phone, it's systemless root. That's how you do it now. It's like standard. So that means that there's going to be, we're going to have to find ways around it. Well, the developer community will have to find ways around it. And, I wouldn't doubt that they'll find workarounds, but as it stands, there's nothing really to point to this being a Nexus successor.
Right.
I think that people are confused because for so long we thought that this was going to be a new Nexus. With the entirety of the first half of the year, we were constantly talking Nexus Marlin, Nexus Selfish, Nexus Launcher, all these things that pointed to this being a Nexus. But in reality, it is not a Nexus, and there's nothing really pointing to this being a Nexus other than the sort of failed rumors that we had in the past year.
Do you think that they're killing the Nexus brand, or is this just a foray into a different way of doing it, and we might still see other Nexus phones in the future?
I don't think Google would kill a good thing like that because the Nexus thing is something that is actually a good thing. I mean, just look at all the enthusiasm that comes out of the Nexus line.
Wait a second. Did you just say you don't think Google will kill something because it's good?
No. Okay.
Come on,
Okay, let me. But this is why right after I talk about enthusiasm, because yeah, sure, they killed Google Wave and stuff like that, but there was no enthusiasm behind that.
People loved Reader, man.
Yeah, all 12 of them. Anyhow, no, but what I'm saying is, you look at the subreddit, the tiniest leak of information about the Nexus gets thousands of upvotes.
Yeah,
people in the developer community, of course, love the Nexus, but now it has put into the mainstream. You go on the mainstream Android blogs and even mainstream publications about technology, and they really, really like the Nexus. Even the bloggers that don't really, really know much about Android, and they pretend that they do, and they're like that hipster kind of Android fan. Even then, they love the Nexus. So it's got a really big presence within the Android community, and not so much just the super hardcore enthusiasts and the developers. It's more of a bigger thing now.
So let me ask this then. Why do you think after what were probably the most well-received Nexus devices, the 5X and the 6P, people seem to love them, right? I mean, regardless of any build quality issues or lag issues on the 5X.
And that's a mystery for me too.
Yeah.
It could
Why is this the time when they change over to like a Google phone rather than after something like super boring like the Galaxy, that Galaxy one, not the Nexus, but the one before, like the gingerbread one that was just the most boring device ever, like why not do this 3 years ago?
Well, there's many theories going around. I don't particularly want to subscribe to any of them. They could be because Google wants to have this own thing that they can push. We have seen that Justin Alberti, this Allo lead developer, he posted on Twitter. They asked him, why is there no SMS fallback or whatever, and he said because the user base of Nexus phones is under 100% of the Android user base, which people took to mean that they thought he meant that it was because of the fragmentation and whatnot. But it's very important to, I think, to look at the way he phrased it, because he didn't say because Android's fragmented. He could be meaning that, but in any case, he said because Google doesn't, ultimately what he implied is because Google doesn't control 100% of Android anymore. And if we did, we would be able to put out all these features that you guys want. So that gives some credence to the idea that Google might want to take back control of Android, as so many people say. But ultimately, we don't know. And I think that we will get more clues once the event comes out. I think that something that will be really interesting, is looking at the wording that Google uses when announcing this phone. Why do they want to release their phone? Why is there no Nexus? I think that there are a lot of answers are going to be explicit and implicit in this event and how it develops.
I don't know about you guys, but if you were to point to like one of the biggest problems in Android today, it would be, it'd be updates, right? It's been a problem since inception. It's always going to be, as long as it's structured as it is today and everything like that. So this doesn't do anything to help with that, right? Google taking back control of Android like the people want or whatever, that we hear talked about all the time. It's this is them showing what they can do with the phone and, not caring if they're super open and this is just lockdown Google build or whatever. And that's cool, but I don't think it really addresses any of the...
I mean, I wouldn't go that far. As long as this has an unlocked bootloader,
that's true.
I'm sure we're gonna do. There's still gonna be an above average developer community and perhaps a great developer community. Who knows? It really depends on how much of that Nexus following it manages to capture or recapture because it's a new kind of phone. But in any case, I don't know. I honestly don't know why they're doing it, but I think that we're going to find out. They're going to say it implicitly or explicitly. The wording of that event, I think it's going to be really interesting. Just like the wording of that tweet and the wording of many things that Google has been saying in the past year.
I didn't expect to see an ad on Monday Night Football for some vague Google rectangle. So that was pretty interesting to see them advertise the October 4th event. But
here's the thing, though. Regarding updates, well, we know that these Pixel phones are allegedly coming with the seamless update partition system. Well, in the sense that, the two partitions, which is not just the system partition being copied, it's actually a duplicate of every partition, which makes it even better, at least for Google in terms of updates. And basically, you got that, and they've been pushing the security patches for a while, and we know that they've been burned really, really bad, particularly in the past year with stage fright and a lot of these issues that prompted them to really speed up this whole thing about security patches, which of course are not being adopted by every OEM, and even when they do. That is inconsistent. For example, we found you can read about this on the XDA portal. We found that the what's called tap jacking, which is basically putting an overlay on top of a permission to kind of make it sound different. So instead of do you want to grant permission to your files and media, instead of being that, it says, do you want to use the app or whatever. And you click yes, and you unwillingly gave the app a permission. That is present. That tap jacking is still present on some security patches, but not on others, even without the same month level. So that's a problem, I think. It's not fully consistent anyway.
Just as a little side note, since you mentioned security patches, I just wanted to say I'm pretty impressed that both my OnePlus 3 and my Axon 7 are on September 1st security patch level.
There you go.
Yeah, I wouldn't have predicted that, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, OnePlus has been really good regarding updates recently.
With the 3.
With the 3. Of course, they're still, catching up.
They forgot about a few other devices.
Yeah, if we forget about all that came before the Scott phone,
Agreed.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm probably going to go back to the OnePlus 3. To anyone interested, I've just really had it with the Note 7. Even the Exynos variant is giving me...
Come on back, buddy.
it's even that variant is giving me more frequent lockups than I would like. And I also have periodic battery life problems, even though I'm not sure if that's just Exynos specific. Like, Media Server has been destroying my battery life. It's crazy. And, I factory reset, now it's working fine. But, I could have gone deeper and dig and see what was causing it, but it's getting to the point where I just don't want to do that level of maintenance just to fix my battery life problem. And I wish I had a way to actually really see what's going on, because the battery life drain descriptions are so vague on Android. Android OS, okay, fine, but what's draining my battery?
Now that I pick up my OnePlus 3, just one more thing that I think is super cool is that picked it up. It tells me I have OTA for 3.2.6, but mine's rooted, and I've got some other exposed stuff going on. And so the phone detects that it's rooted, and instead of downloading the OTA, it downloads the full version, so like the 1.3 gig entire OS file, and then it'll reboot into my TWRP recovery, and it'll update the phone, not like restore or wipe, but straight up update it. And then I'm just back in action with the latest version. You flash Super SU, and you do need to go and rewrite the TWRP recovery. But beyond that, it's a pretty cool process. Instead of just downloading the OTA and then going into TWRP and failing, and then you have to go manually do some other stuff. Like, it's pretty automatic and pretty impressive. So
yeah, that's definitely an annoying part about being rooted, or even then, like something that's a problem with them. It was a problem with the OnePlus 3 earlier on, was that you just simply couldn't, even if you weren't rooted, you just couldn't update the phone if you were in a custom recovery, because you needed the recovery. And it was a problem at the time because there was no individual flashable recovery. So if you wanted to get back to the OnePlus recovery, you would have to flash an entire image that included the recovery, and then you would be able to update, which was annoying.
Yeah, so they made good progress there, definitely.
Yeah, they are.
Well, cool. Well, we've got, that's a really exciting event we're looking forward to. It'll be interesting to see what we're going to hear. Will there be any surprises with the new Pixel devices or any of the other devices that Google will be releasing on the October 4th event? But I think that's going to do it for this week. We had a lot of things to talk about, specifically Google Allo, really looking into it, what's the implications of Assistant in the future, and Google's strategy with this messaging app. And then also a bit of an update on the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 recall and some of the new software features that were added to it, as well as some build quality issues. And then finally looping back to the OnePlus 3, which seems like we've been doing a lot. It's a really great phone at an amazing price point. And the question will be, when do we get some phones that really give it a run for its money? So maybe it'll be coming up on October 4th. We'll keep our eyes out on it. But that'll be all of our topics for this week. I'm Corey Fiak. You can find me on Twitter at Codismsdev.
I'm Eric Holst, and you can find me on the XDA portal or on Twitter at Simplistic with a 1.
And I'm Mario Serafero. You can find me on the XDA portal. You can find me on Twitter. My handle is Tachiangan. I usually publish a couple interesting pieces every week. Plus, I'm always editing behind the scenes. So if you want to read some cool stuff, just head over there, and we'll see you next time.